All right, so we are recording. Little chat here, just about some ideas that popped up and how ideas from one person basically piggybacked and cascaded to ideas from another. So we're just going to kind of see and talk about how sharing perspective can lead others down sometimes even a more intricate path. So Scott, if you want to introduce yourself first, just kind of what are you looking at? What do you study? How do you spend your day?
Cool. My name's Scott Daly. I'm from Grimsby, Ontario, kind of near Niagara and Toronto. I have a gym there. My background originally was more strength training. I got into that because of an injury. When I was about 22, I broke my pelvis in a car accident and ruptured my bladder and a bunch of other stuff. So after a long rehab, I found strength training. I got tons of great benefits out of it. Really, really loved it. But eventually, maybe I got too obsessed with it would probably be the best thing. And so I haven't touched weights, although I do own a gym for quite a long period of time now. And I've gotten more into, I guess, some people, the movement side of things, or however you want to call it. That's led me to Fighting Monkey and Martin, which is mainly Martin Bosey, who I'm learning from, are probably the two main people in that world that I'm interested in, or not interested in, pardon, that I'm actually learning from. Tons of people am I interested in. And then I'm also always trying to learn kind of about plants and nature and gathering. So part of my spiel is that I'm really into collecting food from the wild and trying to use that as my exercise. So I hunt and I forage and I do all those types of things. And so I think that's kind of why I'm so interested in this topic, obviously.
And that topic being the bodies as earth, which we'll kind of come back to. Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Jim, do you want to
introduce yourself? Well, that's a great intro for me because so I'm 59 years old and I've always been into lifting and muscle strength training. And at a certain point in my life, I got enough courage to join a powerlifting gym, and I really helped to build the gym. We ran a lot of meets, including the Worlds. And I got exposed to some of the stuff that goes on in powerlifting gyms. A lot of AK-47s, a lot of fascism. But a lot of good people, and it was a beautiful experience. We would call it, it was like our church. So I have a strength training background, and instead of going to the earth, which I wish that I had done, but I'm just inflexible and old. And instead I stayed in the urban environment and became determined to find a meaningful life, a physically meaningful life, meaning that my mind is physical as well, to a large extent. So my moniker is Muscle Monk. I consider my home, especially for the last 2 months, a hermitage. And I practice muscle meditation. I like muscle. Maybe that's obvious by now. And I really I have training as a social theorist. I'm a body worker, but I have extensive training as a social theorist. And I've always wanted to kind of save the world. I mean, why be afraid to say something as important as that? And a little girl, saves the world in her own way when she smiles when her mommy's crying. So, let's be real and let's keep up the work. And what else do I need to say? My interests are, I have a lot of intellectual interests in somatic psychology. I believe that, so muscle meditation and my path is informed by recent developments in the last 30, 40 years in neuroscience. These are still very recent. Somatic psychology, sport and exercise science, and and anatomy. A lot of exciting stuff has been happening in anatomy that changes our understanding of the body and resolves the mind-body dualism. And so that's where I come from. I really want people to recapture the power of their bodies in society, which means that we're going to have to change society to be a lot more like our natural environment. So that's where I plug in here.
Okay. Before we get into that bodies as earth, there's something that I heard. So Scott Moraz kind of takes the approach that my work, my exercise, my whatever is living. I'm going to go out. I'm going to, I'm not just going to go to the fridge and then come back down. And I'm going to spend a lot of my time out in nature, moving my body, doing the things that I need to do to survive. Jim, on the other hand, it seems like you are much more, it seems like you said you joined a power gym and you kind of
powerlifting gym.
Powerlifting, and but you like getting strong, you like set time for exercise.
I like muscle.
Perfect. Right. And it's interesting because Scott on the other is like, I really just want to be able to function. The muscular portion, the size portion, that is like secondary to me living. Whereas you're looking at, I'm really interested in the muscle first and foremost. How do you build it, etc. Would that be correct?
First and foremost, because I believe that it solves my life pursuit to understand how I can live a life and also lead others and teach others, embodiment and how to reclaim their own power. Yeah. So, but I think, Scott, I really think what you're doing is important and brave. And, if probably what I need to do is like rent a room in your house for 6 months and learn more. Yeah, seriously. And this fat old man doesn't move so easy and jump on trees like that. And Chris, you see me struggling at the last, what are we calling it now? The care lab. And yeah. So Scott, I really admire you. I think that you have important things to say. I'd love to hear your experience. And
yeah, let's transfer there. So how did you kind of talk about your journey, Scott, to transitioning to being like, life is the exercise? How did that transition happen?
When the other one failed, I guess. So when I say like I get obsessed about anything I do, like it's a problem, I think, in most ways. But when it was strength training, I started learning from mainly a gentleman named Charles Poliquin. And he had me taking a great deal of supplements every single day and just really like pushing my body to try to be like a high performance vehicle. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that if I'm handed the right piece of clay, but my clay was pretty dried out and getting a little bit older. And although I got really strong in a normal gym, not in a powerlifting sense, I wouldn't say, but like I was lifting what you go to a normal gym, people would be considering larger loads. Eventually it developed like essentially, I never got diagnosed, but some type of IBS colitis where if I went in and I deadlifted, especially like not just focusing on quality of the movement. Like these days I can deadlift and I can do all sorts of things like that, but it has to be focused on quality, not trying to think about what weight I need to hit or how many reps I'm trying to do ever. And because I was so focused on hitting numbers before, my body started breaking down. And I think that although I love body work and I think it's great and I still do use it, certain things like ART and supplementation from Charles kept me in a game that I should have been quitting, as opposed to I feel like they made me take longer to heal in the long run, because it kept me in a game that I needed to realize was not my game anymore. And don't get me wrong, I think you can weightlift beautifully into your old ages. It's just not the way I was doing it. Not that I even think I had bad form or these types of things. I think that it was just, I was training twice a day, minimum 4 days a week. And just really trying to push constantly. I wasn't giving myself seasons, if you will, where I had an off season. That's the one thing I'd say about weightlifting is, unless you're competing, you're trying to beat yourself out every program. So every 4 to 12 weeks, depending upon how you're periodizing your program, you're trying to break new records and trying to beat new things. And eventually I just broke down, to be honest. And I saw everybody who I could think of, like all sorts of great people. And it wasn't until I met this traditional Chinese medicine doctor from Hamilton. I wish I could give her the credit, but I can't remember her name off the top of my head. But she said to me, "You're gonna die if you don't stop working out." And I was just like, nah. And it just freaked me out. And I told her she was crazy and that I owned a gym and it's not gonna happen and I love it and it's my passion. And she said, just try 2 weeks without working out, go for walks every single day and just see what happens. And so I started going for walks every day. And in 2 weeks, I was hitting every single body fat goal I had, because I wasn't just obsessed with performance. I was also obsessed with physique and all these other pieces of it. And all of a sudden I was just super shredded. It was insane how lean I was getting from just going for these walks. And so I went back in 2 weeks and I told her, like, I'm better. Thank you so much. I can hit the gym again. You cured me. And I went back in, and I think within 3 days, the full-on diarrhea was back. I wasn't sleeping through the night again. My libido was trashed. And it was just like, oh man, like, I guess she's right. And so then I developed like an anger about it for a while, where I wouldn't work out. And I got into the Ido Portal stuff from there. At the same time, I got into the Daniel Vitalis stuff. And both those people, Daniel Vitalis is the rewilding guy. Ido Portal, I'm sure everybody listening to this probably has heard of. And if they're into movement, I mean. And both those things helped me a lot, but neither one of them ended up being for me completely. And they led to where I kind of am now. Yeah.
So would you, in general, saying that you were in a system that was artificial, and you needed that artificial performance and artificial pushing, and you needed to remove yourself from that system in order for the things to self-regulate?
Maybe. I think that I was lucky that I found something that had enough philosophy and perspective that it made me think a little bit more about what I was doing, as opposed to being so dead set on what I was trying to do.
And it's interesting that, you mentioned, Ido and movement culture, how that often serves as a bridge from traditional weightlifting, go to the gym, to, oh, I can do all this other stuff, right?
Yeah.
But, it's interesting, if I objectively look at the demands of those two things, right? Stuff is pretty damn demanding, right? And like it's just, there's just
man, it's really I went for about 3 months to where I was really able to do online training hard with him before my body started to break down there as well. It was no different, and that's where I'm trying to say it wasn't for me. Again, if you're a 16-year-old and you love that stuff and you want to be a ninja warrior or whatever it is, maybe the road for you. In my opinion, I feel like if you're working with him, you're trying to be him. And I'm not trying to knock everybody, but there is more of a want to be him and do what he's doing, where I more want someone who wants me to find me and what is it that is me. And that has been a combination of nature and the people who I'm working with now.
So was it that transition though? Because it's pretty much, would you say that everything you do has to do with like the nature living foraging, or is there still some gym time? I mean, if you own a gym, you're going to be there, but you don't necessarily have to train there.
Well, the gym does not go so well anymore because it's like people don't like my philosophy, and my business partner is a beast, and they're walking into the gym and seeing a 220-pound dude snatching 250 beautifully, and they're like, I want to work with this guy. And it is the wrong setting for me to be like, let's go out in nature, get bug bitten, probably a sunburn, maybe some poison ivy, and a handful of food, because it doesn't always work out and things don't always happen, and it isn't for everybody. So honestly, I made a lot more money and did a lot better when I was telling people about Charles and Ito and following those systems. I was now in the pandemic, I was very fortunate that I forage and do what I do because I've been able to flip, and now I'm making money bringing things to local CSAs and restaurants and working with people who are still, so it's allowed me to adapt. I'm not making great money, and I'm not gonna plan on doing this, but it's a really, really nice thing that it's allowed me to be able to continue to do what I do, and people are starting to see a little more value in it. I think even the people who I used to work with are like, oh, maybe he's just kind of crazy, not fully crazy. So it's an improvement in that sense.
Christine, let me plug in here because Scott's just saying an awful lot of exciting stuff.
Yeah.
And some of it I want to really, really jump on. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Please.
And Christine, I think that basically you hit the whole nail on the head. And it's almost like conversation over when you mirrored to Scott that, in your own words, that it was an artificial environment, and what he needed was something richer, a natural environment, in order for his system, mind and body, to self-regulate. And I think that is just that for me, that summarizes the point. Now, the earth, as we can witness in Scott, it's like our moral ground, meaning that it's going to help us to self-regulate and to go deeper, to have natural seasons and different rhythms outside of the, like, I got to get to work, I want to buy that new iPod, and what about a summer house, and God, where's my pension at, and how come he has a Tesla, and come back into what really matters. And all of that is the gym. And Scott, I'd like to hear what you think. This is how I kind of oppose it. All right. You're right. You're 100% right. But I use the word, I say train like a bodhisattva, not train like a warrior. And because so long as we have this attitude that comes from a dysregulated, hyperactivated, gotta fucking take care of this shit attitude, and it's really, you're gonna go home to like little children, you know, after all of your pumping, you know what I mean? And it's like, what are you taking care of? Okay, you bought an AK-47. Well, congratulations, you gotta defend your family. And it's like, there's too many people going down that road. And even if we're not that off of the loop, our anxiety levels, our activation levels, our ability to find peace and centering and the richness of our self, of our core, what I call what Thomas Myers calls the deep core. We need to shift an attitude. And I say, don't train like a warrior who's going to create, you know, propagate fear and insecurity. Train like a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is a healer, and it works to bring safety from within. And the image that, the one point, anatomical point that I think seals that argument is when we find ourselves in alignment and we feel that power of the earth coming through us from the feet up through the kinetic chain, and we feel lifted, you know, enlightenment means that we are actually feeling lighter, right? We can have an intellectual kind of visual metaphor of enlightenment as this light coming down on us, or we can have a physical metaphor for light, enlightenment, in that we actually become lighter on the earth because we line up and we're made that way. And what seals that argument for me is that not always, while you're training, it's very important to have a grimace. Sometimes a grimace is what is the only thing that'll get you through the performance that you desire. But if you're willing to step back from that and you exercise your cheeks a teeny little bit in that stance of groundedness and postural kind of symmetry, that little smile affects the hyoid, it's so hard for me to say this, hyoid bone, hyoid bone, and will help to reset the scapula and the shoulder assembly so that that neck really locks in a gentle, you know, uplifting kind of liberating way. And I think that that is really our body telling us where we should go with this power, rather than, you know what I'm saying? I love the and animals, you know, whatever an animal does, I'll do it. But the constant anxiety and frustration and irritation of modern society, you know, that's where that IBS comes from, right? Right, Scott? That's how I think about this. Well, I wonder what you think about that. And Christine, of course, I love your opinion too.
Oh,
Does
yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just interesting, like, hearing you both explain your perspective from your respective worlds, right? Like gym, academia, anatomy, right? You have all these components, and it's all this like beautiful, really science-based academia version of like how this is happening, right? Absolutely credited. And Scott's like, I just need to get out in the woods, right?
Yeah,
So again, certainly appealing to different kind of groups and crowds, and we all kind of have the
different parts of us,
right, right, which kind of makes me kind of want to go back to Scott a little bit, in that it also sounds what you were saying is like, Scott's like, I needed to change my environment, and the environment changed me. And whereas Jim, you're kind of in a place where you can't really change your environment, you can't really go live out in the woods, so that change had to happen internally. There had to be work, and there needed to be deliberate practice of letting go of that performance, bear, anxiety, man thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the practice
fear,
of
intimidation,
of
insecurity.
still being able to go to the gym, still being able to kind of get what you need from it, but also cultivating a side-by-side balance where I feel Scott, putting yourself in nature will do that for you. You mentioned like the going out and rain and foraging, and it's gross out there. Like nobody cares about their percentage of body fat when they're like shiver. You know what I mean? Like nobody thinks about their six pack when they're 6 miles from home and they still need to do X, Y, and Z. So I kind of want to, so thank you for that, Jim, but I kind of want to scoot back to Scott and being like, how did you, other than my pain is gone when I do this, how did you switch from that mentality of performance, right? It kind of was causing.
Yes, I'd like to hear Scott respond to what I said, if you don't mind, though.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear what he thought about what I said. Is that okay, Scott?
Yeah.
Is that something you want to do?
Yeah, no, it wasn't anything I disagreed with. The one thing I would say is like, I am not for everybody. I don't think that the gym is for everybody. Personally, it's just my opinion. And I think the gym is great and it's a really effective tool. And it seems like it is for way more people than the stuff that I am is for. But I think someone else may be able to find this, like what you're talking about, rootedness through the heels and lightness, maybe through yoga. And that's what I find through the zero practices in the Fighting Monkey or the father form. in the practice that I'm learning. So it's, I totally agree with you. The only thing that I wonder is like,
How viable is the gym?
I don't feel like I can change people. And that's the one thing I'm done trying to do, is like changing what they think. And if they think that I'm interesting and they think that they see value in what I have, then I'm interested in working with them. But if they're not and they're interested in the yoga, then I'm going to recommend that they go to yoga, because it has not worked for me so far when I try to change someone's opinion, whether it's trying to make a vegan eat meat or trying to make anybody do anything. It's backfired for me, and maybe I'm just not great at making people change. It could be a personal thing, but that would be the only thing that I would, if you wanted, but I'm not trying to make an argument. It was everything else I had no disagreement with. It's very interesting.
Thanks, Chris, for that. I wanted to feel a response.
Sure. And I think going with that, you know, if we're in agreement, like, man, Scott's doing great things, but at the same time, I can be honest and be like, I don't want to be in the woods all day. Like, you know, this is so where perhaps your thinking, or the more embodied lifting in general, your thinking, Jim, might be a bridge to get someone from the gym animates me, amps me up, lets me escalate, to you could do your thing and like also simmer down at the same time. So, I mean, your version, your practice could kind of be a segue in between. So like, for example, maybe Scott, if you had that gym person who, right, that you were like, what about all this other stuff? Could you get them to sense or have sensation about what they're doing? Again, are they up and are they open for that? That's a big challenge, because a lot of people are in that mindset. This place gets me better. I got to do X, Y, and Z, and these are my beliefs, and I'm not budging. Yeah. So I guess kind of going back, how did the mental switch happen for you, Scott? Was it just like little by little?
Yeah, I guess it started with nutrition, because I was so obsessed with nutrition through learning from Charles. And I started just realizing I forget, maybe it was Daniel Vitalis was the first one to really point it out. And he had this Arthur Haynes gentleman on his show that he has on a lot. And he's talking about how much more nutrition is in wild foods compared to store-bought food. And so really it started out as like a pure, like this weird greedy thing that I wanted the best food I could find, and I was going to go get it all. And nature has been really interesting, because what it taught me is every time I approach it like that, it doesn't go very well. Where every time I bring my friend out who's been bugging me to get to this spot that I don't want to go to, magic happens and I don't understand it. So that's where, for me, it's more just been a weird experience that just progressively, slowly kept heading in that direction.
And what like, are you out every day kind of thing?
No, like right now, because I'm trying to work with restaurants, I'm having to be out every day. But generally, no, not in the, well, yeah, I am out every day, but not all day. I'm definitely out every single day, but no, not all day. And there's certain times a day where I definitely try to be out more. Like, I want to see the sunrise, I want to see the sunset. I really think that like that type of natural lighting, and science is actually agreeing with that, is really, really important. And I found huge benefits when I'm getting up with the sun and going to bed with the sun and exposing like, I guess then I got into like Wim Hof and this type of stuff, and there was nothing wrong with it. It was cool, but why are these people in California worrying about being good at being cold? They should worry about being hot. And so like, maybe they're the ones who should do sauna therapy, because for me, if I don't go out in the cold and then I have to go hunt for 3 hours on a real cold day in the winter, I'm screwed. Like, my hands, and part of it is like, I was a pretty spoiled little kid. My parents were pretty had me doing anything I wanted to do. And I didn't want nature when I was young. I wanted to play basketball mainly, and meet girls eventually and that type of stuff. And it wasn't until I hurt myself that my body really, really even mattered. So it's just like, it's been one weird long progression thing where I like to think that I finally found something that I hope it is, because now I'm trying to be me, where every other thing it's been like me trying to be more like Charles or more like Ito. And so I do think that I'm there, but I'm also trying to be not closed and think, oh yeah, maybe this is just the next that. And I have to learn that, because I'm seeing right now that it's not that practical to go try to make a living off of foraging. And it isn't impossible, but I wouldn't say it's sustainable. I'm driving a big truck around all over the place, and it's better than getting my veggies shipped in from California, but it's not really the answer either. And I'm seeing that.
Yeah, and that.
Can I ask?
I was gonna bring it back to you actually, Jim. Just real quickly, but I was gonna say that that idea to capture on is that we have to live, but we also have to make a living in this thing, which kind of branches to you and your economy stuff, Jim. So that's always the, we need to function within the system we exist as well as our own system. And that's kind of the headbutt. Even though we know we're onto something good, we still have bills to pay. So it's an interesting kind of conflict that typically happens there. So I just wanted to make sure that point was said. Jim, were you going to go there, or did you want to go somewhere else with that?
Oh, if you don't mind, just let me talk.
Yeah.
I have quite a few things I want to say. I want to ask Scott a few questions. In terms of me being a segue, I don't think there's a segue. I think that presence is presence. I think that finding yourself in your body is finding yourself in your body. And what I teach is, I teach an anatomically based kind of meditation, active, physical. The way I explain it is, when we meditate, we think of silencing the mind, because the mind is a monkey mind. And we think that if we meditate with our body, somehow we're going to get better silence or something. And we'll enter this sort of this nirvana of a single, what is it? There's a word for it in Hindu, this single point of light, this sense of being. I mean, we all have that, but boy, how fun really is it? And how practical is it? I'm not sure. And I think that when we meditate on the body, our goal is not to silence ourselves, or we have a purpose for silencing the mind. It's so that we can listen to the wisdom of the body. And I believe that this comes through understanding our own anatomy, so that we can actually be in the body in a way that is more deeply true to it. And in terms of me being a segue, yeah, I see myself very much as that, because it's like, I mean, I'm not going to be climbing trees. And a lot of people out there can barely take a step off of a curb. But those people inside themselves, whether they have the intellectual resources or the verbal resources, the cultural resources to think it yet, want to be the way they were when they want to be the way they imagined themselves inside, which is when they were young. And, we blame too much on aging. And I think the value of this conversation is the environment. And no one could argue with Scott saying that the environment is going to stabilize and ground and change us. What I want to say is that we need to take that impetus and take that wisdom and take that experience, and because we create the environment that we live in, change that environment. So if you look at Katie Bowman, you look at a lot of people. If you look at my place, I actually designed furniture based upon modular plyo boxes with furniturized plyo boxes, so that my home is a home for rolling and crawling and, you know, sticking my legs up in the air. I have a small apartment, but the freedom to move is robbed by modern interior design called chairs. So, Scott, my question is for you is, you're the guy that goes out there and you have that, regained that power in nature. How do you bring that home? What does your home look like? Do you have big overstuffed couches and tables and lamps and little china knickknacks and tons of
No,
screens?
I have no couch. I have no couches. I sleep on the floor.
See, there you go. So
I honestly
the environment,
even the floor to me doesn't change enough. Like,
yeah,
I wish that I slept on a
because
surface that's altered more often.
But stop,
I
because
totally agree with you.
yeah, if that lady or me, right, I could not step off the curb without pain not too long ago. All right, I have been rehabbing some shit, and it's hard. It's a lot easier if you're forced out into nature and move, the body does it. But stuck here, you know, in offices and shit, cars, the simple thing like what you've done with your environment is going to make a very significant difference to people in opening up that flow so that then they can hear the deeper argument. I think there's a market for that. I think there's a market for selling people interior design concepts and equipment.
Man, I've come up drawing these tiles so many times that I want to be able to, like, they're different shapes that I can change my living room floor to constantly be different, because when I go away anywhere from my house, my weird shit goes away. Like the weird foot pain that I sometimes have when I wake up if I don't sleep enough and these things like that. And I swear it is just repetitive use stuff from me living in the same house, making the same left turn to go into my kitchen over and over again. But I also do think that, although I just want to get back to that chair thing, because I do agree with you that chairs seem like the demon, but it's only because we're not in our bodies. Because if you think about someone who sits well, they're doing it sometimes for 8 hours a day, and they have some of the most perfect postures and best spines ever. I know that when I hunt now, sometimes I've got to sit in a shitty position for a long time. And those are really, really interesting things, especially if it's a position I haven't learned before. If I get into the same tree stand that I always sit in and nothing's different, eventually I can fall into habits there more easily. I believe I seem to catch myself. And it's when I lose this in my body a little bit. So, like, I guess that would be the same idea as what you're saying. Like, how can I create an environment that allows me to have to reach up and be these things?
Mm-hmm. And the reaching up, you know, to me, that's a testimony to your authenticity, because the last thing anyone is going to tell you to do is to reach up. And if you look at the business suit, we think the executives have the power in our economy, right? With this big, broad shoulders and these, you know, padded shoulders and this tailored suits, and they're like silverbacks. It's very powerful. But if you ever look at somebody, like you can look at that actor who did the Wall Street kind of show, that famous guy. I mean, he's very fit, but when he raises his hands, it's about this far. That's all the clothing will allow you to do. The clothing keeps those hands on the desk working. The executive is as locked down physically as the laborer, in some sense, in a real sense. And breaking through that archetype, that cultural pattern, that norm, and it's all we can see, you know, is so important. And that's what you've done. A lot of other people have done it, but there's this deep truth that we need to, this is my argument, is we need to take that deep truth and translate it. I think I'm more of a translator than a segue, if I can flatter myself. Translate that for all the people out there in their horrible, really frightening shoes who don't know why they can't step down the curb. And another thing I'd like to point out, Scott, is somatic psychology is really so interesting. And I'd recommend you read Peter Levine. A lot of good stuff out there. Healing Trauma on YouTube for free. He narrates it. It's beautiful. But trauma has the function, the body basically responds to fear, not like this, right? We can respond to fear with fight or flight, and fight or flight is going to be very activated, but it's not going to be resilient and self-regulating, as Chris pointed out. Fear is going to result in this, in the seated position, the head forward, arms, shoulders pronated, scapula pronated, core eviscerated, groin weak, low back tight, knees, all of these tissues short from just this collapse all the time, and we just take it for granted. And so by making changes to the environment, we open up and heal trauma as well as the body. And this is one of the things that I find very compelling and very exciting, because although Scott may seem like he's alone out there in nature, you're really part of a movement of people across the spectrum, as I'm a little bit different on the spectrum: psychologists, educators, philosophers, teachers, body workers, trainers, athletes, all kinds of healers, movement people. You've heard Gray Cook use the term the movement. And I think we're really all a part of this. But that piece, that neurological piece of liberating that chronic lockdown kind of trauma that we're so immersed in the built world, I just think that's a terribly important point. I just wonder how you respond to that. Is that okay?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, I guess it would be similar to kind of the way you're responding to me, is if I can't change the environment, like I'm forced to work this 8-hour job where I have to sit at a desk and work at a computer, and my boss is being a dick and not getting me a standing desk. But I even think standing, that's what I was trying to say, is if you stand wrong for too long, I think it's going to do the same damage. And so I'm not saying
diversity of movement. Diversity of movement.
That, and also if you don't have the option, like I'm saying, you have to sit for 8 hours, then you better find a way to potentiate in that position as best as possible. And I honestly think we're doing ourselves a little bit of a disservice by making chairs such a demon, because I've seen what happened when we made fat the devil, and I've seen what happened when we made carbohydrates the devil, and I've seen the power of placebo is essentially what I'm saying. And if I believe chairs are the devil, then I think they're even worse. Where I'm not saying that they're not bad, I'm saying that it obviously isn't that bad if it was a throne, and it's pretty interesting, and it's maybe not that bad of a tool in the right context. And do we overuse a lot of tools? Yeah, and that's why I'm trying to do what I'm doing, and instead of growing vegetables, which I think is more like rowing a boat, I'm trying to find vegetables, which in my opinion is more like sailing a boat. And so it's not like I'm against growing vegetables. I think that they can, while I'm going and doing what I'm doing, I am also gardening. And as I'm taking, I'm putting back because I know I'm coming back there, or I'm maybe, if there's enough, taking some home to put in my garden so that I can not have to go there and I can start to see when it's happening. And now I'm on a tangent, I'm sorry, but yeah.
No, there's no tangents in this discussion.
I feel like we haven't even hit the topic though, but
I think we're hitting it really well.
Yeah, that's it. And
cool.
actually everything I'm looking at time, on be respectful of time, I think that we have gotten at the essence of this idea of bodied earth, maybe much around it, much more than just engaging in it where we would be done.
Yeah. But I guess my one thing that I was trying to get at is that I can't say it's for sure, but if I'm made of the earth and I need to make myself up of it, then I feel like it's just like if I try to eat a really unhealthy cow, it's not going to be very healthy for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if I try to eat a really unhealthy earth, it's not going to be very healthy for me. And if my sun is now being destroyed because we've ruined the ozone, and if my air is now polluted because we've ruined the air, then how am I even possibly going to be able to do this? And so when I was trying to say the bodies as the earth, it wasn't trying to be like, oh, my veins are actual rivers and my lungs are actual trees, but I do think that there's something beautiful at looking at it that way at the same time.
Metaphor.
Yeah.
All of our thought is metaphor.
Yeah.
I understand you. Well, what does that mean? I understand. Right here. It's a metaphor. Everything is a metaphor, a symbolic metaphor. There are very few things we can say that are really pure. Some of the purest things we can say are about specific objects, but even naming is metaphorical.
And I guess my goal in this is that if I can get people to think that, oh, I need to heal the world in order to heal myself, then personally I got healthy and I feel like I have the body that I was chasing, and maybe not like the way I look in the mirror, I don't mean, but I'm fine with that as well. But I mean, I have the body that I wanted before, when I was spending all this time trying to get it, by just doing the things that I need to do to survive a little bit more. And I still do work out and I still do practice, but I do it because I know maple syrup season's coming, and I've carried buckets for kilometers last year. And if I don't do some farmer's walk as a prep, I'm going to be fucked. So I do use things like that as a tool to try to work with it. But I also think that if I over and abuse the farmer's walk away from there and overdo it, now I've done myself a disservice come the maple syrup season, and I'm not going to be able to wake up in the morning excited to go drag a bucket through the forest in the freezing, which I do. There's something about you do it and you start to appreciate it, and it's not while you're doing it, it's when you stop doing it. It's like you don't know how lucky you are how to have heat until you've really suffered a little bit longer. And so maybe it's the gratefulness out of it that I'm really getting. But I guess what I was trying to do with that article and this point is that if we can get people to think that they need to create a healthy world and look at how can we fix some of these issues with dams and some of these other issues, they may naturally start to do it with their body too, is like a dream. And hopefully the placebo I can like sprinkle on everybody is what I'm hoping, that maybe science wants to go down that road and try to prove that. Because
I think the indication is very clear that you are not alone, that you have been preceded. I don't know how old you are, but you've been preceded, as I have been, by a generation, you know, we can say at least from the 60s and 70s and a sail-in and all this kind of stuff, which produced really serious scholarship, really serious scientific work. Now that's what I'm talking about, is this new science. Tom Myers, Peter Levine, these people are right out of East Salem. And they are serious scientific scholars who have, among all those people, found something of brilliant importance.
But like, sorry.
We're not alone. We're a part of a movement.
Yeah.
You're on the earth, and not many people are. But we have to bring to the earth a self that is sociologically informed, because we'll never escape society, and because these are our people. And we'll never have a safe world until we're all safe. And I want to also say, in my defense, as the founder of No Chair Pledge, most of my research is focused on the epidemiology of the sitting disease epidemic. That's where I am, you know, in the world. And it's also called the physical inactivity global pandemic. An epidemic has what's called a vector. The vector is like a mosquito or a virus, you know, that transmits the disease, right? Not all viruses are vectors. What is the vector for the smoking epidemic?
Well, I was actually going to say smoking in the exact same way. I'm in the same boat for smoking. So I don't look at chairs or smoking as any different. I think that they're both tools that people overuse and abuse, and that's when they become a problem. I think that if you look at traditional use of tobacco, it's quite beautiful. And not only was it used to bless things and to give thanks, it was also used in ceremony. And yeah, and has it been taken way too far out of context?
Smoke.
Yes, and so is the chair.
I'll go smoke some pot soon. I think it's beautiful to inhale something of a meaningful nature. However, cigarette smoking was an epidemic that killed us. Chair sitting is an epidemic that's killing us. The research is utterly clear. Thousands and thousands of medical articles on the physiological implications of prolonged sitting. No way you can say that that's good stuff. The point I want to make, though, if I can, is that the vector is how it's transmitted. The vector for cigarettes, what made it different from other smoking, the vector for the sitting disease epidemic, what makes it different from the past, is culture. The marketing campaigns of the tobacco companies changed our habits negatively and built on our weaknesses. The sitting disease epidemic is transmitted by a culture that cannot see a room or a beach or a forest without being rather filled with chairs. And we can't see a life outside of chairs. And
we can't see a room without a light bulb either. I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm trying to say that I totally agree with you.
It's a matter of importance. It's a matter of importance. You know, if you're
totally
really worried about the effect of the light bulb's a problem.
Yeah, let me pause real quickly because this is kind of, and again,
it's heated. It's nice.
Yeah, but absolutely. But this idea of kind of like we have this agreement, and then, you know, our personal fixations, and again, this is everybody, our personal fixations will have us be like, I agree. And then we'll kind of go to this one sliver detail that we've really fixated on and that we really want, you know, the world to see the importance of. And we get so stuck on that we forget the larger agreement that is happening. And not even, in the truth is, it's not even, there isn't really a disagreement. All that's happening here, because it's not a fight, all that's happening is like, I see it this way, and then I see it this way. And then then it goes into like, oh, I have to talk over something because I have to continue it. But the larger picture, and I think what we want to get out of this talk in general, is that we are in agreement of all these things, and our fixation on certain aspects of it cause us to feel as if we get into conflict with people. Where if you step back and zoom out, we want the same thing.
I don't understand how you can call sitting in a chair 12 to 14 hours a day by the vast majority of the world's population of fixation. I think that it is an absolutely key variable in getting from where we are to where we are.
Simply the fixation of the chair, being as in the chair, like Scott was saying, the chair is the enemy, where that chair could be 12 other things, is what he's trying to say. It could be our reliance on things that doesn't give us variability, that doesn't change us up, that doesn't stimulate us, that takes us from stimulation. That's the broader argument. And again, no one's saying that it's not important, but I think what needs to be approached is it may not be the most important thing to everybody. That's all.
I think that, you know, I really feel, Christine, that the invisibility of this problem is utterly fascinating. And we can find the same invisibility in the anatomical misunderstandings that go with it. We have not only removed the possibility of many kinds of movement, but we have removed the ability to even think about what they would require. And I really think that, I think one of the most important things that Scott's raising here, and this is my take on it, don't misinterpret my words if they're a bit forceful, because I'm certainly not a moral absolutist. But I think that the loss of the body and the loss of the earth and our connection with it and the irreplaceable ethical grounding that happens there has made us become either very rigid or very relativistic morally. And I think that rigidity and that relativism we can see in our politics today as a horrible consequence of decades of kind of very rigid or very relativistic responses to real issues and real problems. And I think that the cure comes and when we can ground ourselves in ourselves and in the earth, in the natural rhythms, and get out of our goddamn heads, which is where the relativism and the absolutism comes from, and back into our breathing, living, interdependent selves. I find it interesting that people are so resistant to attack the culture of sitting, modern sitting, when if you look at other healthy societies, other healthy civilizations, and I'm thinking of East Asia, which I know very well, chairs is a non-thing. You might have a dais, I don't know how to say that word, or pillows, or a platform for the elite, for the noble, for the king, for the governor, but you're moving your body in a full range of motion all the time. And you see, I've lived in East Asia a lot, and some 60-year-old ajumoni, kind of a auntie, in her sort of interesting clothes with a big bowl of red peppers on her head, or laundry. And she just crouches down in a way that I can't even do, and waits for the bus. And I don't think that making our modern culture of immobilization I think it has to be attacked head on. And we have to see that this experiment has failed. It failed once the pressures became so severe due to screen and TV technology since the 70s and other other economic factors. But I really say that as soon as you get out of nature and you come home, the first thing you're going to do is get rid of your chairs. And Scott's proof of that, because that's just off.
And I think that's.
And I get very forceful. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect segue. I'm just gonna make a small kind of comment reflection to you, and then I'll give it to Scott to finish off because we gotta for time wise. And I guess the only thing, and I'm sorry, I don't really want you to respond. I just wanted to sit with you, is that perhaps the best way to change something isn't to attack it. And so I just kind of want that to sit with you a little bit, even the idea of being open, because that attacking, and I understand what you're saying fully, can come off as abrasive. And if you want people to accept what you're saying, right, probably attacking them might not be might not be a large scope way in order to make that happen. So thank you for that. I would like to turn it over to Scott, just kind of one last thing, because this has been great, one last kind of overarching comment on all of this, any of this, your floor.
Thank you. I just really appreciate this. I wasn't trying to, I felt bad about cutting you off there and talking over you. I was just trying to say that I didn't disagree with what you were saying. And some people do, like, that is the way it is some people, the pendulum is here with sitting, and I'm agreeing with you. And some people think you need to swing it over here for it to slowly find the middle. And maybe you're right, but like, from my view on politics and everything else I've ever seen, it looks like we go from one extreme to the other extreme to the other extreme. And like, all I was trying to say is like, nobody's really talking about how our way of looking at it may actually be the problem. It's not just the chair that I'm saying this about, it's food. That's just everything. Is like, if I demonize something, it becomes the devil. And every time I do it, now I have negative feelings about it. And I believe that some people have given themselves cancer from their feelings more than from the smoking. Maybe I'm crazy, probably. I've said that 3 times already, so you don't have to worry about that, but it's just my opinion. And I think that that's super important. And if you look at placebo research, it pretty much blows the piss out of most things that they're trying to compare it to. And I just don't understand why we're leaving that piece out, was all I was trying to say with the chair.
Placebo research?
Yeah, that like, if I demonize the chair and I call it the devil, is all I was trying to say is now the person who has to sit in a chair for 8 hours a day and cannot change their environment is absolutely forced to have that belief that they have to chain smoke cigarettes for 8 hours a day, or they're gonna not be able to support their family. And if we could say, hey, it sucks, we need to change your environment, but things happen slowly. They don't just swing over here. If your boss is over here, it's not gonna happen. You can try to quit, you can try to find a new job, or you can talk about some good things that could get you to this spot where maybe you have a standing desk, more breaks, apps that come up that tell you to look away from your screen. There is tons of great stuff out there that you can do to control your environment. And I agree with you. What I'm trying to say is I think when we demonize these things, we lose the big picture of what's really important, to me at least, is finding the balance. And like, alcohol for me is the devil, but it's also the best time ever in the right place with the right amount. I feel the same way about pretty much everything is what I was trying to say, and including feeling good, just in general. Like, you feel good too long, you're gonna find a way to feel shitty. And that's why I think sometimes it's important to go get stung by bugs and get pissed off and sweat your bag off in an environment that sucks, because it's going to make you feel really fortunate about having air conditioning as opposed to taking it for granted.
And I think, first off, I respect both of your perspectives, and I think both of them have something to offer, and that's why I really, really enjoyed this talk and being able to almost being like, we agree, we want the same thing. So it was awesome. So thank you very much for sharing your perspectives. I'm sure we'll kind of get more from your own point of view further on, but thanks for sharing your time and your thoughts today.
Thank you.
It was a fun conversation, Scott. I really, I'm so grateful to hear your perspective, and I'm really glad that you stand your ground, literally.
Thank you. No, it was all very interesting. I appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Very cool. Thanks again, guys. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks, Christine.
Bye-bye.